What is melody? Is it the tune? What is melody? Is it the moon? Is it just the moon? Ask Richard now.
What is melody anyway?
That's a great question, but it's a huge question. Because melody can be heard, I think, sometimes, and it's not that strange, but it sounds a little strange. It's a little weird to answer it this way, but melody can be heard just in the air, sometimes just the wind sometimes, or you know what I mean? There could be total silence and you just hear some sounds, and it's kind of melody. Melody can be heard in rhythm. And the two are not mutually exclusive. I mean, there's a lot of rhythm in melody usually, and even if it's a rubato melody, there's some kind of, that in itself implies some kind of rhythm in a weird way. And there certainly is a lot of melody in just rhythm, in just a drum solo sometimes. And they think about it if they're happening. And to me, that's part and parcel of what they do. So it's a huge question.
Well, let me ask this question then. To you, if a melody falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, is it still a melody?
Yeah, I guess so. I think basically you got it. That is an interesting way to look at things.
What I mean is, you may play something that you think is just magnificently melodic, and 17 people in the audience can think that, and another 3 people say, what on earth was that? And not get it.
What's nice is it's up for grabs. I mean, a lot of this stuff is up for interpretation, which is beautiful. And that's one of the great things about music or about art in general, is that it's not a right or wrong. It's not a winner or loser. It's not, unless it's American Idol, It's not
underwear or lycra,
which is ridiculous. I mean, some of those, the competition in music I guess it inspires some kind of like reason to talk about stuff, and people can get excited. But there's no winner or loser in this area, and there's no real right or wrong. So melody can be interpreted and defined like it's wide open. But for me, I mean, then there's the more obvious kind of realistic kind of interpretation. For me, a strong melody is something that you can kind of remember, that's memorable to me. And sometimes it takes a few times listening to, because sometimes they're kind of complex. Sometimes John Coltrane can play some incredible melodies, and first time you hear him you think, what the hell is that? And then you hear him over and over again and you get it, or you don't get it, or you just say it wasn't really on, usually in his case usually was on. and then sometimes the Beatles could be an obvious great melody. Some of the tunes that they wrote were incredibly memorable and beautiful melodies. So it's certainly getting a chance to play with Miles and hear him play night after night was a great experience, because he was so into singing on the horn. So a lot of the stuff that came out was singable. There was some linear stuff that you wouldn't want to sing, maybe like a scat kind of thing, or even difficult for anybody to sing with their voice, but a lot of times it was singable. He used to tell me he used to get a lot of phrasing ideas from Frank Sinatra, listening to Sinatra, and how Sinatra would interpret a popular melody. And so Miles would get a lot of ideas from that.
Yeah. Well, let me now switch the focus from written melody to improvised melody. Now, you're known as a guy who can write really lyrical tunes, and a guy who can play in a lyrical fashion, but you're also known as a guy who can, in the words of the prophet, shred. So now the question is, how do you personally balance the technical virtuosity which you've got with the desire to play in a melodic fashion?
For me, it's a really good question, and it kind of defines a lot of what I do try to do. I'm not always successful with it by my standards, but certainly not. But I try to balance a kind of a melodic statement, generally in my playing, with some excitement, where I'm not thinking so much about melody or rhythm. I'm just kind of letting go and trying to play lines that if you slowed them down, they would have some melodic substance to them.
Great. In fact, that's such a good thing. What I'd like you to do now is demonstrate exactly that, because I think a lot of lay listeners, they hear jazz and they think,
It sounds like
well, yeah, what's going on, man? But the fact is, I always say to people, if you slowed that down, it'd be a beautiful melody.
Yeah.
So let's give them a blast of something. Just
Yeah.
thank you very much.
I was trying to sing some of that, and that's another thing I try to do sometimes, even under my breath, even if I'm playing fast and you can't sing every note, but try to have that sense that I'm singing, really hearing every note. Miles said that Oscar Petterford, great bass player, used to do that. He said, "Oh, that was Oscar used to sing, tell me to sing every note." Not to tell him, but he said he used to do it. Oscar used to do it, and he could hear him sing. You know, kind of not singing really.
Yeah, I notice you're breathing while you're playing.
I'm trying to do that and sing some of the notes sometimes. I was singing them a little bit louder for.
Thank you.
But
For the microphone, which loved it. It's
yeah.
really-
So basically, I'm trying to make up melodies or lines that connect to other melodies, but even within the line, there's a melody. And if sometimes you take it apart, I've got these right here on the pile on the floor. I have these tons of transcriptions of like Sonny Rollins improvisations, which are incredible melodies. When you slow the stuff down, you hear amazing stuff. I mean, it's really very intricate, very controlled a lot of times with a great improviser like Sonny Rollins, of course. And in his statement, in his whole statement, some stuff that's just like almost a rhythmic phrase, like talking. Like,
Well, give me an example of that. Just
Okay.
one little phrase, and then slow it down.
all right, here's one. I hope I can do it. Here's a Michael Brecker phrase that I took off something a long time ago, and I hope I can remember it. And I play it all the time, and I'll probably goof it, but.
Give it a harmonic context, please. What's
C.
the chord?
C.
Okay.
You'll get one good one.
Okay, go, yeah. Okay. But, well, okay, let's try something else.
But
Let's
you
try-
got that idea,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And slow. And that's a lick. Done. In improvisation, you don't want to use too many of those. Mike Brecker used to say that he used to do the same thing, transcribe solos sometimes or cop different things, play them through different keys, and then forget them. Then they kind of come out as the language of, it's kind of like if you read a book and you get a couple of phrases and so you get more of your own ideas from that book, that if it's a good book, that kind of inspires your own thinking, but you remember a couple of phrases that an author said and say, oh, this is kind of a cool, I remember how the guy said it. He said it's something like this, and then you might quote a phrase. So sometimes you can get that, or you do enough transcribing, and you get tons of melodies in your ear, and they kind of come out in your own way.
In the melodic arsenal of jazz, you've got a couple of things which I know you are fond of. One of them is your use of chromaticism. So if you could give an example of one little phrase without any chromatic alterations, and then show how you add the chromatic approaches to make the phrase more interesting.
Let me give you, now this is kind of more of a, I'll give you an example of something I'm still studying with this great teacher, Charlie Banakis, who's a piano player, but he teaches all instruments. He teaches kind of theory to all instruments. And the way he kind of, it's kind of a common exercise, or not uncommon, and there's a lot of this, of course, in classical music, is by some of the chromatics are like neighbor tones, or embellishments of chord tones. And chord tones are probably, in some way, it's probably oversimplistic to say it, but it's kind of true, is that they're very fundamental notes in melody. They're the notes that make up the sound of a chord. If you have a C major triad, right? Those are the notes C, E, and G. Do, bo, bo, right? They're melodic by themselves. If you play them together, you get the triad, the sound of the triad. So in the case of a C minor 7, which is a four-part chord, C, E flat, G, and B flat, you get that separate and then together. You get the sound of that chord. What Charlie teaches sometimes is chromatic from below each chord tone, and then scale from above each chord tone, which is another common embellishment. Those are two common embellishments. So let me just take a C major 7, C, E, G, and B, and illustrate that just real quick. So B to C, with chromatic from below C is B, and to the chord tone, resolve it to the chord tone, then E flat to E, G flat to G, B flat to B. And you get a kind of a cool something. It gives you a kind of, it's like a little bit of clothes around the body of the chord, you know what I mean? Then there's a scale from above. It's another common embellishment. Now if the scale in C major 7, the scale is a C major scale. The scale from above a C is a D. Scale from above the E is, which is the third of the C major 7, is an F. Scale from above the G, which is the fifth of a C major 7, is an A. And the scale from above the major 7, the B, is a C again. So you get... If you put those two together, you get bo, 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 bo. That's the chromatic from below and the scale from above. So that's a common kind of a bebop cliche almost. It's also in a lot of classical music.
Exactly. It sounds very much like Mozart could have written that.
Exactly.
Thing.
And Bird, apparently, from what I think I heard this one interview with Paul Desmond. It's a really famous interview, and I remember Mike Brecker was playing it for me. Paul Desmond interviewing Charlie Parker, and Charlie Parker was saying that he learned a lot of his lines and his linear ideas, his melodic, linear, very linear ideas, from classical, like clarinet studies, which has a lot of that stuff in it from classical music, a lot of embellishments like that. So so that's got a lot to do, of course, with bebop and a kind of a jazz, quote unquote jazz kind of bebop kind of concept in some ways, those chromatics. But there's still around chord tones a lot of times. Now you can take it even outer than that. Herbie Hancock does that, or Train, and go even further with chromatics. You really just need kind of a line, sometimes in between strong points in a phrase. You might just play a line that just goes from point A to point B and goes through wherever. It's kind of more abstract than that. The melody could be more abstract, but there is a lot of stuff around chord tones. Chord tones are very fundamental notes, and of course you want to learn music. To me, it's very important to learn it both ways, like you learn a language. If you go to school, you understand the language in terms of spelling, in terms of pronunciation, in terms of verb conjugation, the logistics of the language. But ultimately, with any language, including the language of music and the language of jazz or pop or rock or classical, you really learn it by doing it, by playing and by listening to people that are fluent in it. And that's how you learn any language, and especially this one.
Let me ask you about another element of your melodic improvisation style, which of course is poly wanna-cracker tonality. So if you could demonstrate that, I thought maybe Janek could play just some simple tune, like whatever, any simple tune you want, and where we can hear the chord tones, the Latin thing maybe, where you do the chords and you can hear them clearly. And you just play the real chords and then show how it would be if you superimpose other.
I might just start off with just the chord tones of two different chords. One, the original chord, we'll play something in C minor 7 again.
Why not?
Why not? And I'll just play in C minor for a while using a C Dorian, and then you stay in C, Janek's going to stay in C, and I'll play also a minor third up for just for there's tons of possibilities, but I'm going to actually think E flat Dorian, which is a minor third up from C Dorian, and also think the chord E flat minor 7. And so we're playing over C minor 7, but I'm going to be superimposing or going between those two tonal centers.
Hit me, big boy.
Okay, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is all C minor. E flat. E flat. C. E flat. C. E flat.
Great. So you don't want to just do a little, some little example of how that's applied to a whole chord progression.
Take a blues.
A blues,
Just
okay.
a blues, a B flat blues.
Okay.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Question, which is you'll love this one. How does a musician develop the technical ability to do absolutely anything and yet have the taste not to?
Don't ask me. I've been working on that one forever. I think that's a lifelong, well, all of it is really a lifelong voyage, because no one ever gets to any of those points. And the more, the better you get, and the more fluent you get at the language of jazz, and the more, it seems like the more you know, the less you know. Because the universe of music is infinite. So the more you kind of look out into it, it becomes bigger. You know, the more you learn, and then sometimes you come back to just earth and say, well, you know, what's wrong with this? You know, that's pretty strong right by itself. And how it's played is also very strong. How a melody is delivered. I mean, just can be that or there's two different stories right there, and we're just talking about 3 notes, B.B. King notes, you know.
Right.
And so there's a whole lot of options. I mean, an infinite amount of options. And then there's, as we just kind of tried to play through, of you know, lots of different chords on top of chords, or tonalities that you can go and make up as you're going along. So there's lots of options, and I think that then it's up for grabs. I personally like a lot of energy. I like the way, for instance, Michael Brecker, everything he used to play, and just about every recording he's on, has got some stuff to it. And he played a lot of notes. He played with a lot of fire. And he could also play very lyrically, very melodically, very like a kind of a statement, then take a breath, and build a solo. And then by the end, he was steaming, usually. Miles had a different kind of approach, but not dissimilar. He played less notes. Jim Hall can't play fast. He works on his chops some. By the nature of the fact that he can't play fast, his style is defined, and most people's styles are defined as much by what they can't do as what they can do. And then they're also defined by who they are and how they feel, and whatever how their heart beats, you know. And so there's lots of kind of options. So I wouldn't, I still work on that. It's a great question, and that balance is always tricky. And sometimes when you have the chops, I find myself, without looking over my shoulder all the time, because when you're playing, you want to let go. You want to let your heart out. But without looking over my shoulder while I'm playing all the time, there's a little voice that is saying, don't overdo it. Pull back. You practice some cool stuff, but now it's time for the gig, and you want to listen to where's the drummer, what's the mood of the whole tune, what's everybody else doing, what's the bass player doing. Try to pull back and develop your solo.
When you were starting out to develop your solo thing, to what extent did the listener reaction help you discover what worked and what didn't melodically? What kind of stuff, you got a great reaction from? What kind of stuff, perhaps, I know it's impossible that an audience would not react enthusiastically to you, but let's just say
it happened.
That's okay.
Okay.
But just at the what kind of things did you find? Maybe I should do more of this and less of that, and
Well, there are times when the audience can be really helpful in terms of inspiring you, and then there are times when you just got to kind of have a balance. And Miles was I think the king of this, which influenced his playing and informed his playing in a way that was really fantastic, which is he was very aware of the audience and kind of what got over, and he could get the house in a way.
Yeah, which is contrary to what the perception of him is.
Well, it was very important to him. I'll tell you that right now. It was really important to reach people, because music is a communicative thing. It's supposed to be a language to reach people. You don't want to just make it in your basement, So he had that balance, and also what his goals, his personal goals and his personal ideas were, despite what anybody would do. He kind of wanted to hold true to those, no matter who said what. So that was a great balance. I think it's a great balance of having your own kind of integrity, musical goals, and your own stuff, which is, the sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned. There's not a right or wrong. I hear some people say less, more, who knows? What the hell? To me, it's up for grabs. And musical is beautiful in that regard. But the thing is, I think it's also great to have an audience will balance you, kind of, in some ways. If you come out burning and you play the first tune is killing, and then you play the second tune with the same intense energy and the same kind of, it almost sounds like the same texture in the same tune, and the third tune with the same intent, you're going to notice the audience saying, we got it the first. Radio Richard.